Okay, here we go. All right, guys, please stay with me. We're starting. And by the way, I'm going to talk about being a writer. I'm going to tell you how, as a writer, how do I how do I make a book successful? How do I make a chapter successful? Do you really need your computers? Because when you have an audience that's looking at a screen when you're talking, it doesn't feel like you're with people or have an audience. How do I make people interested in this? And this is my device. This is my narrative opening. And if you think about a map with Europe over here and China over here, the Eurasian continent, they are at the extreme east and west. There is no further extreme unless you want to scuba dive, right? You cannot go further extreme than the West and China. Okay, for you sticklers, okay, you can go to Korea and Japan, but they are the Chinese civilizational complex because they got their Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism from China. Not to say there's nothing original about them, but they got their writing from China. So okay, so extremes, geographically, also extremes cosmologically. And when you're talking extreme, is not radical another word for extreme? Is not radical another word for extreme? So I'm going to put the Hebrews over here. Somebody said Christian earlier, and I think I told you, let's not confuse our terms. We are talking about the Hebrew cosmology. We're not talking about Christianity at all. And it doesn't matter. I'm just reminding you of that, especially given the fact that people are sometimes sensitive about this stuff. I am being descriptive. I will be respectful, but I will be descriptive because I am trying to think here and observe and test some hypotheses, and I want you to show me what I'm missing. Here we go. I'll start with the Chinese, actually. I will say first that I think that the Chinese are radically, and we'll just put radically in most of these things, natural. That came out with all of you. And the Hebrews, by contrast, cannot be any more supernatural. They are radically supernatural. What does super mean, literally? Do you guys know the root word super? No? Not strange? How about to superimpose something? What are you doing? What are you doing when you superimpose? When I superimpose an image over another one, super means above. Super simply means above. There is something above. Okay, Evan and David, please separate. You distract me. You're far too comfortable with each other and it distracts me. All right? No offense at all. I want one of you to find an empty seat over here. Okay? Go. Say bye. And do it quickly. All right? Now, are we back to focusing? All right? Radically supernatural. The Chinese are radically optimistic. And the Hebrews, I argue, are radically pessimistic. And I'll drop off the pessimism. Pessimism. The Chinese are radically, I claim, rational. Even their myths make sense. They might be fantastical, but they make sense. Were you saying this sort of thing? Okay. Within the context of a 3,000-year-old, 3,000 years ago when we just came out of farming and we just started writing, within the context of a primitive or primary civilization, everything that they imagine is stuff that is like, well, I can see based on the scientific knowledge that you didn't have at the time that you would think, well, that's a reasonable explanation of how things could come to be. And after all, he carved it. Oh, that makes sense. And he died, and then wind came out of his lungs. That makes sense. And life forms grew out of other life forms. Well, I've seen dead dogs on the street with maggots growing out of their red, rotting carcass. I've seen that. That makes sense that humans would be the maggots out of the dead god. It all sort of makes sense. There's nothing unnatural here. Yeah. Okay, we'll go back to that in a sec. Thank you. Okay, an egg appears. Except, you know what? It's kind of random and weird that there's a chicken and then one day there's an egg. Eggs happen to appear mysteriously from places where there was no egg. For example, the underside of a chicken. Eggs just come out of nowhere. Fish eggs come out of fish. So out of yin and yang came an egg. And what's inside of eggs? New life things that come out of eggs. And so all this change going on. Well, there was nothing, and there was an egg, and then it changed into something else, and then it died, and then it changed, and other things happened because it died, and it rotted, and new life forms came, and all this sort of rational. Now, this is where I have to be careful because words have connotations, and I'm certainly not trying to. Oh, okay, so this is my latest try. What's the opposite of rational? Irrational. Are miracles rational? No. Is to take an example from an imaginary religion, is a god who can fly from one mountain to the other like Superman. Is that rational? Is that like miraculous? That's miraculous, right? And so if a person believes that some imagined god flew from the Himalayas to the Alps in 30 seconds, and the religions believe that, well, clearly they believe in miracles. It's not rational, and so they believe it. Well, why do they believe that? Why would a person in that imaginary religion believe that?
There's hope that miracles can happen.
On a much more basic level. Because they're told to. Thank you. Who tells them?
Parents.
Their parents. Who tells the parents? Who tells their grandparents? There's more than just parents. Huh? Religious leaders, religious authorities. For example, priests, popes. Are you guys keeping up with Pope Francis, by the way? I love that man. He is so amazing. You don't have to be a Catholic, man. It's just like Jesus is like Jesus wants to hang out with the Pope. He's incredibly awesome. He's fun. I could have tea with him. All right. So, radically doctrinal. Doctrinal. And actually, I took a seminar with a Harvard prof who we'll meet later, Michael Puett. He teaches Chinese philosophy at Harvard, and he's a really cool guy. And he brought up this word of the Chinese being undoctrinal. They are not a doctrinal people. So let's define this term doctrinal. I was looking up the etymology of it, the root of it. Anybody want to take a guess? Shall we define the word? What is doctrine? Thank you, son. Huh? A set of beliefs. A set of beliefs. What words do we know that are based on the word doctrine? Doctor is actually based on it. And you know what? Doctor comes from docere, or docere. I don't speak Latin, so I don't know how to pronounce it. But it's the root of the word doctor, and you know that it actually means to teach. And so back in Rome, back in the Latin days, teachers were doctors. Now it's like, I don't know, like, physicians are doctors. But doctors who teach doctrine. Teachers teach doctrine. Religious authorities teach doctrine, a set of beliefs, right? What's the difference between a doctrine and a fact? Monica? They can't be proved. And yet we do believe that deity A flew in 30 seconds from the Alps to the Himalayas, vice versa. We can't prove it, but we believe it, right? Because that's our doctrine, right? Yes, Taka.
The Chinese believe in qi, right? Isn't that supernatural?
I will argue no when we get to its emergence into China. Have we seen qi anywhere in this packet? It's a later development. It's Zhou dynasty stuff. All right.
Wait, what is rational about a guy living for 18,000 years and making Earth?
There's again within the context of a primitive and also folkloristic. This is a folk tale, right? I'll tell you what's rational about it. First of all, he dies. He's a god and he dies. Show me any living thing that does not die in the observed natural universe. Can you? We have discovered that recently. I read that. It was amazing. As far as we know. Ask him after class. A Japanese guy. He's fascinating. But anyway, I doubt anybody knew about this jellyfish that lives forever until it was on the web a year or two ago when we both read it on the New York Times. So until 2 or 3 years ago, in this jellyfish, which has not been determined to be immortal because it lives a long time. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, blah, 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 blah. But getting back to observable nature, can you meet me this far? What lives dies. Life dies. That's part of the natural cycle, is it not? Nothing does not die. Everything dies. That's nature. And so their God dies. Pangu dies. So that's whoever asks what's rational about a God living 18,000 years. He dies in the end. Also, it's a folktale, so I would just say that the Pangu thing, again, remember, they don't even believe that. To me, I can even add that. That makes them even more rational because you know what? They don't claim to know what nobody knows. Nobody knows whether the doctrine of the Hebrews is true. Nobody knows that because it's doctrine. God did it in 6 days. Well, how do you know? Because the authorities tell us that. They indoctrinate us. The Chinese don't even claim to know that. Would you say it's rational when somebody says, where does the universe come from? How long did, who made it and how long did it take? Do you think it's rational for a person to say, I honestly have no idea. How do you expect me to know that? That can't be answered. So I'm not going to pretend to know. It's rational, right? A reasonable person would say, that cannot be known. So why are you asking me such a silly question? And then finally, it's sort of related to optimistic, innocent. And guilty. Now, I will go straight down the list and give you the evidence that I infer this from, that I deduce this from, because I'm using the inductive method, right? Fact. From this preponderance of facts, we come to a conclusion. I am inducing here. Radically supernatural. Speaking doesn't make things happen. That's supernatural. That's magic. That's miraculous. That's a miracle, right? Pretty much all of the cosmology of the Hebrews is based on supernatural, magical, miraculous acts, right? And so does anybody want to challenge that one? Supernatural. There's something above nature that doesn't follow natural laws because it's beyond nature. It's transcendent, right? Let there be this. In fact, I was here first. Nature, I'm going to create you. And nature, you're going to die at the end on the last judgment and all that sort of stuff, right? Well, that's a Christian belief, but anyway. And then there's a place after nature. When we die, we go somewhere else. Outside of nature, this place called heaven if we're lucky, and hell if we're not. And again, that's Christian, that's not Jewish. The Jews don't believe in heaven and hell. That's a Christian thing. Nonetheless, radically supernatural. Now, radically natural. Oh, even nature, right? Flood. Oh, God's punishing us. A supernatural being is punishing us. China, flood. Oh, it rained too much. This is a problem. We'd better start digging the river and trying to control this river because otherwise we're all going to die, right? And so we do. And you digged on the flood for 10 years and all that sort of thing, right? And you got a problem, you work on it. But floods are natural. Floods are supernatural here. On and on. Radically optimistic. Radically pessimistic. In Hebrew cosmology, what is the earliest known human's name? In Chinese memory, what is the earliest known? And by the way, they don't say that Fuxi, Shenong, and Huangdi, I just told you the answer. They don't say that these guys are the first humans. They're the first whose names lived on after they died. They're the first remembered ones. Fuxi, you might recall, accomplished two things. I don't remember what your reading says. I think there are two things I want to focus on. What did Fuxi accomplish? Please speak up. He domesticated animals, and he created the family unit. You know, instead of us just all sort of walking around as a herd, why don't we, like, you know, bond according to mother, father, and that sort of thing, and make a social unit out of this so that we've got a better, tighter support group. Families are man-made, are they not? Some animals will, like, lay offspring, and off those offspring go, and they have no relationship with the family, right? So what did Fuxi do? Radically optimistic. The earliest person we remember is a person who made useful things, the family, and animal domestication, yeah? Domesticated animals, tamed animals. The next person we remember in China, Shennong, what did he do? The plow? The hoe, and the plow and the hoe, okay. And so, well, all right, so we've domesticated animals. That means that we can follow them around, use their milk, use their meat, use their skin, all that sort of thing, right? They can feed us, they can clothe us with their skins. We don't have to hunt anymore. That's pretty useful. Thanks for domesticating animals. Look at the next guy who comes along. Based on what my ancestor did, domesticating these things, I have figured out a new use for them. A plow. I can make now us not have to dig and till the soil, but animal labor do that. So I'm going to improve upon the accomplishment of an earlier generation with my own intelligence and merit. And I'm going to hook a plow up to a buffalo and let that buffalo furrow the soil so that we don't have to work so hard. It furrows better, we eat better, and all that sort of thing. So wow, thanks first two known people by name in Chinese memory. You invented family, domesticated animals, invented a plow. I think Shennong also invented the calendar. Calendars are very useful. Do you know why? For primitive societies, do you know why calendars are always, astronomy is always the earliest science? When do we plant? Because if we're 2 weeks late planting, it might be 2 weeks too late, and we might not eat this year. And if we're too late harvesting, so those things seem to, like, you know, smart people notice patterns, and smart people say, when those stars are in that configuration right there, that's when we start planting. We've noticed this pattern year after year. Shennong created the calendar. It says what? Let's see. Yeah, all of these are, if you know, hold on a second, where is it? Okay, all right. Oof, my mouth is so dry. Let me introduce you to something. Have any of you ever encountered this in Greek mythology? How there are 5 different versions of the same myth? It happens in China too. You'll see this thing all the time, right? After all, these are cities and towns over a place the size of the United States, and it's not like they had an internet to keep them all in the same, or a printing press to keep them all in the same story. So you'll hear different versions of the same thing. The important thing is the idea. And the idea, again, I think I've proven it. What an optimistic view of mankind. Our first ancestors invented useful things and then improved upon the useful things that were invented by those before them, generation after generation after generation. And Huangdi is the yellow lord. Write that one down. Huang, yellow, Di, lord. Because Huangdi is, these are all legends. They didn't really exist. But as legends, they are incredibly powerful, especially Huangdi, the yellow lord. What did he do? He's credited with everything, the whole kitchen sink. He invented cities, carts, roads, warfare, pacified the Yellow River and made it into the first state, on and on and on, right? So he created civilization, urban civilization, and peace and government and political order and all sorts of stuff. What an optimistic, our first ancestors story. Do I need to go into the first ancestor story and the pessimism of Adam and Eve? Can you get more extremely pessimistic than that story? You've got it perfect from a human perspective. You were given the perfect paradise. All you had to do was not make one simple mistake, and you made that mistake. You fell, and you were an epic fail. And your failure is transmitted generation after generation after generation into every next generation through blood. Is it not? Doesn't the curse carry on generation after generation? Doctrinal? Well, we don't know. We don't know if this is true, but we believe it because we're told that this is true from birth, and our society agrees on this. We have faith in this, right? Doctrinal. Again, the strongest argument for China is we have no book that claims to know where any of this came from. From the very beginning, we never claimed to know. So you can also put this idea of skeptical. It's remarkable that it comes out so early because in Greece, in Europe, in a lot of places, skepticism, the how do you know philosophical viewpoint, skepticism, you've got to prove it. I'm not just going to believe doctrine. You have to prove it. I'm skeptical. Those develop very late in other civilizations. And in China, it's just there from the start. And finally, guilty, going back to doctrinal guilty. Original sin is not a Jewish concept. Original sin is a Christian concept. There's nowhere in the Old Testament that talks about original sin and needing salvation. That's a Christian addition to Jewish doctrine. Nonetheless, we can all, I think, agree Adam and Eve are guilty of disobeying God, and they're punished for it. Cain is guilty of killing Abel, or is it? Yeah, and he's punished for it, right? He's a murderer, right? And just on and on and on. And they are punished. In a very sort of pessimistic universe where if we do wrong, we should fear because floods will come, punishments will come. As Tegan was talking about, plagues will come. In this cosmology, you look up and you see where rain comes from, not punishment. You have nothing to fear because there's no Father up there, as I think you said. There's no God up there, as several of you said. And so there is an innocence there. We never sinned. We never fell. We are not fallen. We are innocent. Earth is home, and it's not out to punish us. It's a radically innocent and at-home, natural species, I almost said, because they almost do to me sometimes seem like a separate species in terms of how these animals live in the universe as opposed to those animals living in the same nature. Yes? Yep.
So I like talking about history with the Greek. We were talking like before an emperor's fall or something like that. You could face like war in the nation and like failure of crops.
Yes. And there will be all sorts of superstitions that come at specific points in Chinese history, like qi and other things. And qi, by the way, I would argue is not superstition at all. And we'll get there, right? So there you have my claims. And now you have your opportunity. Hi. That's it. Yes, you can look at it. No, it's all right. And so now you have the opportunity for the rest of the class. Okay, guys, she's looking at the couch. All right. So let me finish this thought, and then I can be finished, and you can start working on the next thing, or we can continue discussing. You want it? Okay. So how are we going to get it from point A to point B? Great. After school today is great. Tomorrow, what is today? Today is, I know that. What? No, D day, A day, B day, C day, X, Y, or Z day. It's A day, so tomorrow's B day, so I have first block free tomorrow. First block, so between 8 and 9:30 would work? Yeah, good. All right, thank you. Let me know, okay? And she didn't close the door well. Sorry, absent person for whom I'm making this recording. You just had to sit through that. I'm not going to edit it out. It would take me 10 minutes to save you 5. All sorts of mandate of heaven, all sorts of less rational, possibly things. But that's, so keep these questions open, all right? Notice, I have made claims and I have supported them with evidence. I have asked you to criticize, to poke holes in, to undermine my claims, to challenge them with counter evidence. Please do.
Right now?
Yeah. If you haven't, yes, Savannah.
You said there is, they have no God but fear, but so do they have no God at all?
Is Pangu a god? No, again, these are both folk tales. These are both folk tales. There's no church of Nuwa. There's no church of any god. Any of that stuff like that. They're more like Achilles. No, like Prometheus and Epimetheus to us, right? Or Zeus or whatever, right? Except, of course, the Greeks believed in them at one point, like we believe in our gods now. Any other? Yeah.
Do you think that the Chinese believe that they can prevent natural disasters if they work hard? Because the I think he worked hard by digging all the rivers. So do you think that by just doing good things that they can prevent those kinds of things?
What do you guys think? Do you think? I'll give you my answer, and you tell me if you agree or not. I think that the Chinese, because they're optimistic and are hardworking, as so many of you saw, I think if we work hard, we can definitely improve our chances of avoiding future floods, right? By dredging the river, by building levees, by doing all of this work, right? After all, we are the people who later will build the Great Wall and the Grand Canal and the Three Gorges Dam today and on, right? That's the first thing. So I think that they're optimistic, and I think that this is evidence of it. There was a flood, and yeah, we worked 10 years, and one guy worked 10 years, and he never even stopped at his family's house, although he crossed it several times, because by God, he was going to solve this problem through work, and he did it. So do I think that they think that being good will keep a flood from happening? No, I think that sounds more like Noah, right? People were evil, and so there was a flood. I think over here, China would say, essential China would say, if anything happens, we know what we have to do. We got to work to solve it, right? And we have to work hard. Now, again, later there are all sorts of things that will pop up, and they're very interesting, but this is the longest history in the world. So they come and they go, kind of like, I don't know, Zeus came and went in the West, right? Any other questions? Challenges, qualifications? Yeah.
So, I don't see the connection you have between innocence and being skeptical because, the fact that they, doesn't it make them a little bit cocky in saying that we don't know, we can't explain how the world came about, so we're just going to assume that nothing, and it just happened. How is that making them innocent? Isn't that?
Oh no, I'm not saying that that's making them innocent. I'm saying that the skepticism is rational. It's reasonable by definition. If I came up to you and said, ask you some question that you can't answer because you don't know, right? And then in fact ask you a question, what time am I going to die? On what day? And person A answered that question with authority, and you said, how can anybody know that? It's impossible to know. Is that not a reasonable response to that question? The skeptical part.
Well, can't they say, doesn't it make sense for a normal person to say, maybe there's a supernatural force that we don't know about, or
Sure, maybe.
So then why?
Oh, and trust me, China will talk about maybe this, maybe that, on and on and on, but they will never say, and because I said so, it's true. Maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, maybe that. Yes, that's different than it's true.
So then how do they explain, the existence of the universe?
They don't, because they know they don't know. That's the reasonable part. Yes. Good.
I get your reason to say why the optimistic side and the evidence of it. The only thing that it kind of confused me when you first wrote it down because when you said that he was your pessimistic, I kind of disagreed with that because I didn't hear your evidence first, and so I might have meant that when you're talking about how they believe in miracles and stuff, but because they believe in miracles, that makes them optimistic. So I think it's kind of unfair because you're talking more their pessimistic view on humans.
Okay. Oh, and thank you. And I hear some challenges like this, and I just in all honesty, because I believe in intellectual honesty. It's a virtue to be intellectually honest, right? Intellect is the place where you try to learn and know the truth and all that sort of thing, and where you're not dishonest with your own mind, right? And so I've heard people say things, and so I invite you to challenge or qualify these things. I've heard people say, it is wrong to say that the God of the Hebrews is one to be pessimistic over, because after all, he made them clothes. He loves them. He made them clothes as he expelled them from the garden. God is love. Is there any evidence to qualify that claim that God is a loving God? After all, he made them clothes. That's the evidence. Is there any counter evidence? He killed the entire world with floods. He damned the entire human race with death and labor because one woman broke his rule. So yes, he made clothes for everybody. That was a nice thing. But to say that that makes this an optimistic religion is, to me, intellectually a stretch. Yeah, go.
Can you fairly compare these two? Because the doctrines we see that he was really.
And if you ever need somebody to speak up because you want to hear what they're saying, feel free to interrupt us all and say, speak up. Okay.
Can you honestly compare these two? Because this one, like, beliefs they have is based on like religious beliefs. This is more of it's not really, it's more of just a national.
It's a good question. What do you guys think? Tegan, what do you think? Is it fair to compare China and earliest China, because that's what we're doing, earliest China, and earliest Israel? Because this is a religious culture and this is a apparently non-religious culture. So is it fair to compare them? I would say yes. I would think there are obvious reasons to say, of course it's fair, but if anybody, including you, want to challenge that, Sun Han.
I think it's fair because it's like you're comparing the roots of the two cultures more than like you're not comparing a religion with a non-religion. You're just comparing like how two different cultures started off. So it's like I think you can compare.
Because again, that's why I called it cosmology. Because notice this is a cosmology. Nature seems to have sort of the uncreated, always here, unthreatening. The universe, we're part of it. We're just animals, natural things among a natural order. There's nothing threatening about it, but you gotta like do your work to keep from drowning, starving, or dying.
I'm saying, like,
but this had a different cosmology.
I'm just saying they can use like the characteristics of religion, like because like afterlife to justify all this maybe supernatural stuff, like the belief that there's an afterlife. So.
The belief in the afterlife is one that deserves to go in here. That could be seen as optimistic again. Oh, wait a minute. There's the promise of salvation in heaven. By the way, not to the Jews. The Jews just die and they go to a place called Sheol, which is hell-like. It's close to the Sumerian, just shadowy underworld. Right? You use this dusty little thing in this dusty little unpleasant place. It's not hellfire. S-H-E-O-L. This is the Jews, the Old Testament. Heaven and hellfire, that's Christian. That's later. That comes from the Iranians, who had heaven and hell concepts and Satan as a demon instead of God's helper, which is what he was in the Old Testament. In Job, Satan came and actually helped God test Job's faith. Satan was God's assistant to like see how strongly faithful people were. But anyway, so you could say, oh, but there's a promise of God's love and salvation, all that sort of thing. But then who can, with intellectual honesty, say? But on the other hand, you could also say, well, I would have to qualify that's absolute optimism. I can only partly agree with it because, can anybody fill in that blank?
Yeah, because their God died, so that's sort of a negative.
This God dies?
No, in the.
No, we're talking about the Hebrews over here. Well, how about this? Does everybody go to heaven? Does everybody go to heaven? Who doesn't? The bad people? That's not true. So you guys know so little about religion. It's not bad people that go to heaven. That go to hell. It's not how bad you were. That's what purgatory's for. If you sinned, purgatory will clean you up, right? You'll have your sins burned away, but you'll go to heaven. Because we're all sinners. We're bad, right? It's not bad people that go to hell. Who goes to hell? Those who don't accept Jesus, right? And so this is, we could say this is optimistic if you're Christian, but it's certainly not a happy ending for the large proportion of the world that is not of that doctrinal phase, right? And so, is it fair to compare these two? I guess I will close this with this comment. It's necessary to compare these two, because you know what? Missionaries in the Ming Dynasty, I told you this last time, didn't I? Missionaries in the Ming Dynasty are going to arrive on China's shores, bringing this doctrine. Please hear this. Please hear this. Don't be mad at me for making you actually like look at things intellectually instead of this is school, not church, and this is history, and these are the two civilizations. This is the civilization that will come to this one and say, our doctrine is true, except it's Hebrew Christian by now, right? Because the Christians come. This is earliest. 1,000 years later, there's Jesus. The Christians come with the same doctrine, the creation, Genesis, all that, the fallen, original sin, salvation, on, and they come to China to save China. We are bringing this cosmology to this cosmology and we came here with the single motivation of explaining to you, China, that this is wrong and this is right, and your soul depends on you believing that, because we don't want you to go to hell, right? And for 500 years, that has been an issue, including the issue that killed the age of emperors altogether, right? So is it fair? It's necessary. So notice I just set up a wave 4, Ming Dynasty. We'll be reading Matteo Ricci, an amazing, amazing Christian missionary who came to China. He was the first one to read Confucius. He gave us the name Confucius because Confucius' name isn't Confucius, it's Pangu, right? So this guy is Italian, read the Analects, and he was a missionary, and he was a brilliant, brilliant Renaissance man. So we'll read this stuff, right? But this encounter is unavoidable, and these thoughts are unavoidable. So I close. No offense. I invite you to continue challenging me, but I also invite you to see, as we move forward, if this essentializing of Chinese civilization holds true, all right? Are they going to continue being radically natural, radically optimistic, radically rational, and radically innocent? Or will the universe ever become a place where it's a threatening place now? We can't be so secure, like the cat sleeping out the HTTP right now under the sky. It's like, this is a safe place. Right? I'm done. I saw a hand. Did I? No. Okay.